As Fayetteville grows, we look at the roads that people use every day. The Ramsey St Cooridor is the focus of one study now. Planners met with citizens to get input on what will make that often used road meet the needs of residents, business owners, and visitors for years to come. They presented the preliminary plan, and we were there to bring you the ideas.
Well, we're really happy to be here to present to you the results of our three-day workshop. The project area and the objective of this project is to really look at the region from downtown at the intersection of Ramsey and Rowan all the way up north, moving to just beyond the Fayetteville outer loop to the edge of the city incorporated area, and look at Ramsey Street in terms of a number of different issues, principally about land use. What is a reasonable framework and policy guideline to organize those land uses? You know, it's a very long corridor. There's a lot of different things going on, predominantly commercial in character, then sort of these lighter tones residential, and you can see some larger blue and purple blobs. Those are mostly institutional, or in this particular case, this is the VA hospital, and here you get just about 401 Country Club, mostly reds and dominated by bigger box commercial activities and some smaller localized commercial. Then you have a lot of vacant, older big boxes that from one reason or the other just didn't work out. In fact, you have 5 of them that represent about 250,000 square feet of available commercial retail. And this is not an issue that's unique to this community. It's an issue that communities around the US and even increasingly around the world are faced with. Sort of the commercialization, they just move on. Or if they're given the flexibility, it doesn't work out, or it's not the right space, or they need more, they want to go super X or super Y, they need more space, and they just build another one down the road. Here's Methodist, this very large blue piece right in here. This orange, mostly multifamily, and then some of these lighter tones, again, residential housing and some duplexes back in that zone. Transportation and land use are interwoven. Decisions you make about land use have a great impact about transportation and movement of traffic and congestion. This next one is land use and commercial activity, and I think the principal big ideas associated with this really follow on to what we heard from the community on the 14th. We have a lot of commercial already right now. We don't want a lot more commercial, especially we don't want a lot more big box. Let's try and focus those and maximize those in the area where it's areas that it's already occurring now and makes the most sense. And in areas, and that's principally here in the downtown zone, at the intersection just north of MLK, where you have the Services Administration area and some commercial uses, and of course in this great stretch between Country Club and Stacy Weaver up until you approach the front of Methodist University. And then finally, some of the area up in here where the Food Lion and the Health Center are, there are probably going to be some additional pressures for commercial development up in this area as well. And then this last one, the environmental group that was looking at environment and connectivity, we tried to map both environmental features, you know, where of course Cape Fear and the floodplain, where the lakes are, and then importantly, where are all of the greenways or floodplains or wetlands and places where there's natural connectivity. Mapping all of those out and then looking at where some of the logical connections might be to start to create these green loops and these green circuits so that you can move through the Cape Fear Trail and possibly come across, say on the gas line easement, come across here back into MacArthur and these neighborhoods over here, or come around Methodist University and make some of these natural connections. And I think eventually some of these will be important future pedestrian connections, some of these become wildlife corridors, and I think some of these also identify maybe where there might be an additional park that could be incorporated into this overall canvas of recreation and connectivity through this zone overall. We worked hard to develop what we think the plan framework needs to be, both for the broader land use strategy that we've just started to draft out for your consideration, as well as some of the focus areas that we're looking at. And there's really, I think, 7 big topics that anything that we develop really needs to take into account. Number 1, organize land use and elements tailored to the strengths and weaknesses of each of these zones, and also things like beautification. We don't want necessarily one sort of, let's just put crepe maples all up and down the corridor. Maybe there's a way, if beautification is a big issue, that we look at each of these zones because they have different land uses and things going on. We can diversify the public realm or do some different things with monumental signage or gateways or whatever those might be. Number two, there are some important focuses where we might have some mix of activity. We might want to encourage certain types of activities to assemble themselves, or there are areas that are already under certain types of pressure because of traffic or growth or development. Really trying to encourage and focus these areas to have a mix of activities and certain types of things that are moving beyond just trying to force more commercial and more of those sort of very straightforward uses in those zones. Framework number three, item number three, limit commercial growth. I've sort of hit on that a couple of times, but trying to really focus any future commercial growth, and especially the big box growth, limiting it really to areas and parcels within these zones. And I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Protecting and enhancing the area's environmental features, and this notion of the linkages, creating and allowing for multiple modes of access and connection and activity, and especially orienting a lot of this around the signature piece that you have here, which is the Cape Fear River Trail. Establishing a series of public realm improvements, trying to provide some visual harmony, some thematic elements and some other features, as well as landscaping and signage and things that should be consistent. Clearly transportation, seeking improvements supportive of public safety, access, really blending a lot of the work that DOT is doing and making sure that the work that they're doing is in harmony with what we're thinking, and we have to also address areas that they're not looking at. And then finally, and this is something that was talked about on the 14th, making sure that all of these things, all of these public goods and all of these great ideas as they're brought forward have a basis of reality. So we may show a lot of great ideas, but we need to sit down with developers and say, does this make sense or not make sense? If we're going to talk about beautification, we need to talk about ways to pay for those types of improvements. We think we've identified through working with the community that the area between Country Club, which is right here, all the way up to Stacy Weaver, that we can accomplish a lot of different things by focusing on this area, focusing on beautification, focusing on economic development, focusing on activating the big box retail, and a number of other items. And if we really look at this area as almost a small area plan, that we can achieve a lot, and that spillover effect I think will be positive for Ramsey Street overall, as well as if we look at beautification here, there's elements of that will be applicable throughout the corridor overall. So we've got, as I mentioned, 5 vacant big box areas, and we sort of listed them all here. They're very highly challenging, they're very hard to let. They were purpose-built for the users that were there for some respects. It's difficult to get other users to sort of come into these spaces. At the same time, I think given that we have 5 in this area, we also probably have to start to think a little bit creatively about a few of these spaces. Other communities are looking at a number of different things, looking at breaking the masses into smaller modules. Can you make them smaller retail shopping? Can you split it down the middle and make some areas where residential can occur, some types of studios or other types of things? Maybe some of these masses can be broken up a little bit differently. We also have to consider from a regulatory standpoint that there may need to be some things that we do differently about attracting tenants in here. We may need to be more flexible on parking requirements. We may have to really consider some tax incentives or some other type of program. Number 2, corridor beautification. When we talk about beautification, there's a number of different things that might be part of that. Pedestrian scale, creating a hospitable public realm by doing landscaping, lighting, street furniture, creating a sense of place. This is my neighborhood, this is my entry to my residential area, this is where I like to shop, this is where my child goes to school. Limiting the visual clutter, maybe some traffic calming in some of these areas, slowing the traffic down a little bit. Plantings, landscape, sidewalks, looking at lighting standards, looking at maybe some certain types of signage, banners. We may only pick a couple of little areas, but even by making certain investments at key intersections, again, you could really change the flavor overall of the corridor or certain longer stretches of the corridor. Number 3, as I mentioned, activation of some of these key parcels. These 4 parcels here represent almost 150, 160 acres of undeveloped property. How those are incorporated with some of the existing land uses that we have now, I think becomes an important aspect of the project. Expanding connectivity throughout this area. What are some of the key places and points that we can have that occur? And so expanding connectivity is really about trying to stitch some of this, not all of it, but some of this fabric in a way that really allows for trips to be internalized, for people to feel safe cycling or walking, for children to feel safe going to school, and not forcing everything onto just a couple of major thoroughfares. So finally, the next steps for us, after we collect the information and feedback from this meeting, is to spend the next 5 weeks to come up with an early draft of the plan, presented to you all on the 30th of October, then to take that feedback and then come up with a final draft plan and submit that within the first week of December to the council for consideration.